Hey everyone, it is Matt, and welcome to episode 57. A little introduction tonight. I do want to apologize. One, episode is delayed, and also our editing standards are not quite the same. This is a long one. There will be very brief show notes, but because of the interview, because of the over being 2 hours, and because of a bunch of other stuff that's outside of my control, this episode is not quite the audio quality we usually have, but hopefully you'll enjoy the episode the same. It's a long one. It's a good one. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, I'm Matt Peterson.
And I'm Rich Trappier.
And this is episode 57 of History on the Table.
57 is a good number.
Rich, my room is just like full of white smoke.
Ooh. Wow.
Do you get the reference?
I do get the reference.
Okay.
We'll see if everyone else gets the reference.
We'll see if anyone else gets the reference. Here's a little teaser. We'll pull back how the sausage is made. Pull back the curtain. We recorded a little bit of this episode ahead of time.
We did the middle of the sandwich first, and now we're going to do the bread.
We are doing the bread. So, no war game tonight, and we're going to quickly go through what we've played and all that stuff because we did two featured games this episode. We had the patron pick, of course, which is Downfall, and as we alluded to last month, we talked about Republic of Rome with a special guest, and it was brilliant, and we've already recorded it. So, before we get there, Rich, play some like epic music or something in your head. It is my pleasure.
Okay, it's just in my head. I don't have to sing or anything.
No.
Okay,
no, well, I mean, you can if you want, but it is my pleasure or my displeasure to announce the 2024 Every War Game Ever bracket winner. Actually, why don't you announce the winner?
I don't remember who won.
You don't remember who won?
Me. It wasn't me.
No, not the person, the game.
Oh, the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Justin won back to back.
Justin won. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I remember what game won.
Upsetting Roads to get it. I'm calling it an upset.
Leader.
What?
No,
What?
I said Advanced Squad Leader.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's Empire of the Sun somehow. I blame Patrick for this.
I do too.
He was the ringleader.
The good news is it at least advances Empire of the Sun.
It's going to reflect on his bonus this year.
Yeah, and a little upset where everyone thought Roads to Gettysburg 2, which was going to be retired to the Masters bracket. Empire of the Sun comes up with the 11 seed over the 4 seed victory against Roads to Gettysburg 2.
Yeah, March Madness.
Congrats. So
that's why you watch the games. That's why they play them.
You play to win the game, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So
congratulations to what is a very good game.
Yeah, and since I played it, I can say that now.
Yeah.
2024 winner, Empire of the Sun. The 2023 winner was also a Mark Herman design, Pacific War. And then the de facto, since we did GCACW as a combined winner, or as a combined entry in 2022, is Roads to Gettysburg. So all three of those will advance to the Masters bracket. We don't have to deal with them next year.
More chances for Zeppelin winner. Zeppelin Raider to get
Zeppelin winner, if you will. It'll
Zeppelin be winner.
Exactly. Yeah, so we have a busy episode. Lots to talk about. Of course, we and some buddies met up and played some games last weekend. But before we did that, you had a chance to play a game you talked about last month, War of the Ring. How'd it go?
My HotT Blooded game last month, I played War of the Ring. Yeah, so I got together with Mike, and he's got like a totally tricked out copy, which is really cool. He's got like the 3D mountains and little figures and everything. And yeah, so we had a great time. First time I ever played it, I just kind of stumbled my way through it, and I actually won somehow. I got some really good dice rolls and snuck the ring up to the top of Mount Doom and threw it in the volcano. Spoilers for those of you who had read the books. But yeah, we both had a really good time. Mike is really into this game, and he's been looking for someone to play with more regularly. So we've already got a rematch scheduled for next month.
It'll live up to the hype?
Yeah, it was great. It was a great game. And like I said, he's got everything for it, like every single expansion and all. So, I'll just go to his house and play his. I don't even have to buy it.
Very good. Well, speaking of hotness, this was like everyone was playing this weekend. The Kansas City Historical Gaming Group met up, and our featured series this month was Men of Iron. We also had some players playing Commands and Colors, and then some members from the Command General Staff College were there demoing some of their games. I did not get to check them out, but they looked pretty damn interesting. Anyways, I played Men of Iron Norman Conquest, specifically Battle of Hastings. It was good. It's Men of Iron. I think it was kind of unsatisfactory for my opponent Rex, because he tried like a shield wall approach where he was just going to wait me out, and that just kind of turned into his men getting slaughtered, and then he had a very unfortunate flight roll, and the game was over.
Yeah,
and that's Men of Iron, baby.
Yeah, I still got Norman Conquests still in the shrink. I'm going to be getting it out very soon here.
Yeah, well, I think doubly so. As a little teaser. There will be more Men of Iron to come.
Yeah.
Before I go ahead.
Did you want to talk about Lake Viking at all, or are we going to talk about that later? Or because the rest of the games I played, obviously besides our featured games, were not really war games. So
yes, let's save the non-war games for the back part.
Yeah,
but what we could go ahead and talk about is Successors.
Yeah, we played that one together. So was that your first time playing that game?
It was, and so. If you are unfamiliar with Successors, it recently had a new version from Phalanx designed by Mark Simonich. You are the successors to Alexander, and you're essentially taking two named figures. Actually, more. You can recruit more, but you get like two little standees or minis, and you're running around the map, and you're placing political counters, influence, much like Washington's War, Hannibal and Hamilcar, that type of thing, to political influence over a region, as well as moving around fighting combat against little rebels and other players. But the kicker here is you're all champions, and you are vying for legitimacy and victory points all the time. And so you'll lose legitimacy if you attack another player unless they're the usurper for the turn. So if someone is way ahead in victory points, it's intended to design as jump on the leader. But then one player starts the game with Alexander's body, and he's running around trying to bury it somewhere. You made the comment that narratively it's brilliant, and I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I've only played it once, right? Like one play, played it all afternoon. I think it overstays its time on the table just a little bit, but I also just don't know if this game is for me. I don't think it's a bad game. It's just not, for whatever reason, it did not click with me.
Yeah. It's the first time I've played in probably 3 years or so.
Okay.
And I've played it probably 3 or 4 times total. Every time I've played it, I've enjoyed it, but it's also not one that like we just played it last weekend. I'm like, I'll play it again in a year or two. You know, it's fun. It's a good light-ish multiplayer game.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think you just nailed it. Like, it's good. It's perfectly good. It's not remarkable. Well, I mean, I made remarks about it, so I guess it's literally remarkable. But like, it's not amazing. The production quality is really nice, and it's cool to have these minis. But
yeah, and I don't even have that version. I've got the GMT version, so I've just got standees. But
and we all know how much of like a Mark Simonich stan I am. Like, I love everything Mark Simonich touches, but I don't know. This is just fine, and it's okay to be just fine. Like, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not bad. It's fine.
Yeah. I'd even say it's good. So I'll mention one quick other game real quick, just because I think it's really interesting. Battle of Mackinac Island. This is from Snafu Game Designs.
Is that the Battle of Mackinac Island game?
Yeah. No, this is not the St. Louis Battle of St. Louis game, which is the official title. So Snafu is a store in Spain, and they also have a production wing called Snafu Design. And so this game was designed by Matt Kelly, published by Snafu Designs. And this is one of the last battles of the War of 1812. And then, so the U.S. or the American troops are trying to retake Mackinac Island. And so this is a very light, small footprint game.
Where is that? Is that Michigan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it's just, well, I like the game. You can play it solitaire, you can play it multiplayer. You have a very limited menu of actions that you can select from, and you're trying to either eliminate the opponent or vie for control of these two wood areas on your left and right flank, either one. The Americans have to maintain their wings, so they send out their troops at first. You have 12 units, I think, and if either of your wings are ever depleted, Americans lose the game. Really simple. Rolling a d6 to see what happens. If you're playing solitaire, you're just pulling a blind chit to see what the British do, and maybe it cancels your event, or maybe there's a little firefight, whatever. It's fun. It's actually very fun. It's one of the best, like, kind of quick playing solo games I've played in a while. You know how I felt about Kimby and Fu last month.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 15 euros, but then you have to ship it, and I think it's like a flat 15 euro ship. So, like, then I threw some other games on, and it's just a smidge over like a postcard game almost. It's fun, but it's also like, it's not 30 euros fun, if that makes sense. Like, it's a
Yeah.
very fun game, and don't take that as a knock against the game or the design. It's just, that's the nature of business when you're bringing stuff over from Spain.
Yeah, sure.
So, like, last week I talked about the Legion War games. It was $16, and that was a fine game, but it was cheap enough that it justified it. Where here, this is a better game. Well, they're about the same. I like this one a little bit more, but you essentially have to spend at least 30 euros, excuse me, to bring it over, and that kind of stinks. I mean, a little. Maybe there's a print and play on BGG. I know Matt Kelly has some other games that you can print and play on BGG, so maybe this one's out there as well. Anyways, that's Battle for Mackinac Island. If you're looking for a very quick playing little solo game with about 20 counters in total, it's pretty fun. I liked it.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. That's it. Is that all we played war game wise?
Word game wise, yeah. I played a bunch of family games this month and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And obviously we played some surprisingly large number of non-war games last weekend at Lake Viking, but for war games, that's it. And
Okay.
obviously our featured games.
Of course. Yeah. So did you read anything this month that you want to talk about?
So I read a book that was really surprisingly good. Like, this is not going to be like my favorite book of the year, probably, but like if there was a book for an award for biggest surprise, this one is definitely going to be in the running.
Okay.
So it's called The Faithful Executioner, and it's called Life and Death, Honor and Shame, and the Turbulent 16th Century
Wow.
by Joel F. Harrington. So it is so this book is basically a biography about an executioner, obviously in 16th century Germany. He's in the 1500s. He lived in a couple of places, but Nuremberg for most of his life. And obviously, so he kept a journal, and that in itself is unusual for an executioner to even be able to read and write, but he did.
Right.
And he kept a journal and everything. And it's not the biography goes a little bit into the executions and the tortures. There's some stuff in that, nothing like over the top graphic or anything like that, but really it's more about like this guy's thoughts on his life and his place in society, and it's just really fascinating. I mean, this guy was just like, he was very forward thinking. He was, he would like muse in his journal about how unfair the punishments were for men over women. And this is 500 years ago.
This is
he just,
nonfiction?
yeah, this is nonfiction.
So shocking.
It is. It really is. I mean, the whole book was just like such a pleasant surprise and just so well written. And I mean, if you like the execution and the torture stuff, he talks about that a little bit. So, they talk about like his death house and stuff like that. And they don't talk too much about the torture. They talk about what he does, but they do go into the different types of executions and all the things that you could do to get executed. not a pleasant place to live. If you broke pretty much any law, you could get hung or get your hand cut off or something like that. But it was just such a fascinating book. And really, I mean, like the biggest thing about it was, so his dad was an executioner and he basically apprenticed under him. But his dad was forced into it because some guy did something somewhere. I can't remember what the original crime was, but like the local lord basically press ganged his dad into being an executioner, which at that point, it like killed all of his social status and he could no longer do anything besides be an executioner. So then his son had to be an executioner. So now this guy, Franz Schmidt, I think his name was, he basically spent his whole life trying to build his family some sort of reputation. And, you know, at the end of the book, he actually wrote to the emperor and he's like, I did a really good job and everybody likes me. And, you know,
everybody
can you
likes
please
me. That's questionable there,
well,
Franz.
I mean, you know, basically he was highly respected.
Right.
And he's basically said, can you please like basically legitimize my children? And the emperor did that. And so it is a really good book. I enjoyed it.
Okay, so Joel F. Harrington was not the executioner. He just took these
No,
executioners.
he was the guy that wrote this book about, I think Franz Schmidt was the name of the
I see that now.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, when you mentioned this last weekend, I was like, what? I mean, I know then the backstory of like my father was disgraced, so I became an executioner.
I know. The whole thing is just crazy.
Right.
It was good though.
Oh, I might hear more about it. I mean, this may wander its way over onto the want to read. I read some nonfiction that I'll talk about later because actually a couple people on the Discord had recommended it, but I'll save that for once we push all the games off the table. All right, Rich, I'm gonna pull a you from last month. Looking forward. What am I hot blooded for?
All right,
what am I all horned up for?
I didn't even write mine down because I'm gonna surprise you with mine.
Okay,
but I want to hear yours.
All right, so last month you picked War of the Ring.
Yes,
obviously you played it. It was great. That's designed by Roberto Di Meglio, Marco Maggi, and Francisco Nepatello.
I'll take your word for it.
Yep. The same design team, at least two of the three, have designed Dune War for Arrakis. Yeah, Marco Maggi and Francesco Nepatello are the two who went on to do Dune War for Arrakis.
Now, is this a new game?
It is. It's a big old CMON Kickstarter with a bunch of add-ons. But it's Dune. I'm not a huge I like
3D printed worms, I assume.
Exactly. So yeah, I've got mine out. I've got it all organized. I've got all the add-ons that I wanted. I did not originally Kickstarter. I found someone else's copy who must have not liked the game, I guess. I don't know. But the reviews for this have been amazing. And one of the most interesting things is supposedly it does multiplayer better than War for the Ring. So hopefully I play this like you played War for the Ring. We'll keep the trend going. But yeah, Dune War for Arrakis. I am horned up for it. And the second movie, part 2 of the movie, is getting outstanding reviews.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually currently reading Dune after talking to you, I think last weekend.
Oh, did you do the audiobook?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm enjoying it. And I have seen the first movie. So I'm actually kind of surprised after having seen the movie, the movie is very faithful to the book. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the second movie too, but I think I'm going to finish the book first.
Nice. All right. What about you, buddy? What are you looking forward to? What are you all hopped up on?
All right. I've had this question asked for me, I think a couple of times in the last year, like, what game would you make if you could make a game? And I've always said, I want like a modern naval game, something like Fleet, but set in modern times.
You can't pick a game that doesn't exist.
Yes, I can. I'm hot blooded about it. Don't tell me what I can't do.
Are we allowed to talk about this?
We as a group voted that Mitch could not come to our gaming weekend last weekend. And he spent his time working on what he is calling, well, he posted on Discord, so it's not a big secret.
In a private channel.
Well, never mind that. No, I don't care. I'm excited about this. Next War Naval. I want to see it. Do it. Make it, Mitch. Come on. I'm hot-blooded about it. Do it.
I really hope, just so we can get that. You know what? Even if we can't, I'll just put in a string of bleeps so we still
Yeah,
get your
exactly.
hot-blooded reaction, and
There
then
we
people will
go.
be really like, "Wow, what is Rich really fired up about?" And they'll find out in like 3 years.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, well, it sounds like he just got a free playtester.
Oh yeah, I think he does.
Awesome. Well, this is normally the point in the show where we'd have the war game, but
Yeah, but I did so well last month. We're just retiring it.
no, don't. No, we're going to bypass it this month. I'm going to shelve this game that I've set here. The game is actually literally on the shelf behind me. I did not pull it off. But we'll save it for next month. And now,
Okay,
folks,
so we're doing
you
something
can
new
treat
tonight,
yourselves
and that is
to our
where I
wonderful
mentioned we have a
conversation.
double feature
We've
with
been
Rex,
building
who's
this
kind
up
enough to
for
join us and talk
months,
to us
literally.
about
It's
one of
been
his
favorite
couple
games
years
of
in
all
the
time as it stands right
making
now,
ever since
and
Rex
help us
introduced us to this
navigate
game. But we have a special
Republic
guest
of
tonight.
Rome. We have a
So
special
enjoy this,
guest,
and we'll be back in a second.
clay molder, clay shaper, whatever you want to call it. But Rex, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you, because I don't know if I've told this story on the air or not, but when Republic of Rome was first pitched as a game we should play, meaning with Rich, myself, you, Mitch, I was very skeptical, and I think I was skeptical because you were recommending it.
That's often the case. That's fair. I I think it came up because we were going to be playing John Company, and I don't remember if you had played John Company at that point or were
Hmm.
just really wanting to play it. But my recollection is that led to some of the skepticism because of my pitch was basically, well, if you think John Company is good, wait till you see Republic of Rome.
Yeah, and boy, were you right. I don't know, Rich. I always say I know you're a big fan of that. I don't know if it had as big a sweeping impact, but before we get too far into that, so double feature tonight. First off, we're talking about the Republic of Rome, designed by Richard Berthold, Don Greenwood, Robert Haynes. Original art was Charles Kibler, with subsequent art and later editions by Dave Dubisky, Kurt Miller, George Parrish, Patrick Turner, and Mark Poole. Real side point, Mark Poole is one of the most prolific and famous Magic the Gathering artists. His card art is some of the best, so kind of cool to see Mark Poole's name credited. We're mainly talking about the original Avalon Hill edition, as tricked out by the voice you hear, Rex, originally published in 1990. So, Rich, give us like the rundown.
Yeah, so it's a
1 minute
game
drill.
where you play powerful families during the early Republic of Rome. So I'm sure the years are on the game, but 500 BC ish, I think, is probably about where the game starts. And you play families that are vying for influence, and it's kind of a um, cooperative slash competitive game where you're trying to keep Rome afloat, but you're also trying to increase the influence and power of your own families. So you'll have a variable number of senators because they die and they come back into the game under people's control. And there's basically a couple different mechanics that you're trying to use to get points for yourself. There's influence, which gets you votes, and there's popularity, which ultimately will lead to the thresholds that'll allow you to possibly win the game.
Okay, so Rex, you are the instigator, the pusher. The reason why this game even came on my radar, and you've put a lot of effort into making just an improved play experience. So I want to hear like if someone came up to you and they're like, wow, you've put a lot of effort into this game. What's it all about? How would you even sell this game to someone, assuming they had never heard of John Company or anything like that?
There's nothing really like it.
Mm-hmm.
The games that are kind of like it are all explicitly derived from it. It's I've heard it described as semi-cooperative, but I don't think it's semi-cooperative in the sense we often use that term in board games or
Sure.
war games. It's there is an all lose aspect that if Rome collapses, then you will not declare a winner. The game has beat you. But despite that, the game is all out competitive in terms of actually what you're trying to do throughout the game. It's just a matter of managing Rome so that it doesn't collapse, or at least doesn't collapse until you're ready for it to collapse, because there's actually certain circumstances in which Rome might collapse, but if you've positioned yourself correctly, you may still be able to effectively be Julius Caesar and step in and declare yourself emperor and the Republic dead.
Yeah, I think you touching on that aspect of, and Rich, I want to hear your thoughts too. It's actually where I wanted to started, because I'm playing it better. This idea of co-op in wargaming, and co-op war games exist, right? And solo experiences can be combined to make co-op, but this is really you first have to make sure the Republic of Rome, and we make this joke when we play, and I find it hilarious, like, oh, victory mat. But I set victory mat aside because you have to, up to a certain point, put your own personal gains aside, or you, like you said, you all fail in this game, or make sure you can manipulate yourself into the best position while still advancing Rome's, or maybe pulling back. Like, all right, I'll take a turn off, whatever, because it's clearly for the good of Rome to advance these measures. I don't, like John Company, obviously, which is heavily influenced by Republic of Rome, of course. I think of things like Battlestar Galactica, where like a hidden traitor mechanic almost. Obviously, that's not the case here, but where you have competing interests, and the competing interest is just strictly the game needs to go on, and we need to do our best.
Right. And I think a lot of games that are labeled semi-cooperative, you can usually play them as a pure cooperative, whether it's written in the rules or not, but there's a very much a cooperative experience there, and then it's almost like you're declaring who did the most to defeat the cooperative aspect of the game. And
Yeah, I think like deck builders, right? Like if you're playing Marvel Legendary, like, oh, I defeated the most bad guys, so I'm the
right,
winner. Yeah.
And the other thing about this game is I think a lot of cooperative semi-cooperative games, it's the group win aspect of it is the culmination of the game, and then you also then or shortly thereafter, figure out who among those actually won. But Republic of Rome is the degree to which it's a competitive game kind of varies with where you're at historically. The early Republic is notoriously difficult to get through. That's Rome basically consists of the Italian peninsula, and it doesn't necessarily have all the resources necessary to conquer all of its contemporaries and create the big sprawling empire that is going to be there in 50 BC or thereabouts when the game ends in the late Republic. And so if you're trying to play all three eras from start to finish, which I've
Good luck.
never done, and that's usually you're going to have a winner or an all lose long before that. But the late Republic, the cooperative aspect is much less of a concern in terms of Rome's collapse. It's just Rome has gotten over the hump, so to speak, and is going to be fine, and you're probably going to have to actively try to force it to collapse.
Okay.
But if you, but even then, it's probably just setting somebody up to rebel and march on Rome and take on the Senate and try to win an individual victory.
So I want to talk about the individual victory conditions because we've alluded to it. But before we do that, Rich, any comments on like I don't know, the split in the tone of the game where you're both as playing for the good of Rome, but then also you're somehow manipulating the game for like the good of Rich?
I never play that way.
Oh
What are you
my
talking about? No, I think it's interesting because it's it's very much a stomp on the leader kind of game. Anyone starts getting their head a little bit too high, there are definite mechanisms in the game to kind of punch it back down. So you kind of want to grow up a number of people so that you're in a position where you're going to have to put someone sort of over the top, and there's different levels. We'll talk about victory conditions in a minute, but rather than just having one guy that's getting like all the glory and all the popularity, all the influence and everything, once that starts happening, you're going to quickly start hitting him so that he gets back down.
Yeah, and
which I think is interesting. And to your specific question, because you have anywhere from, I guess you could be down to 1 or 2 senators, but the average is 3 or 4 senators in your sort of family altogether. You kind of want to have a broad spectrum of where they are so that you can say, hey, look, this guy is not a threat to anyone. So for the good of Rome, let's build up this guy.
Yeah, and so before we like talk about those mechanics of why are we building people up, why are we even considering this guy versus this guy, and what that looks like in the game, Rex, how do you even win this game? Assuming that you've gotten Rome to where you want to be, you've survived, and you're not gonna lose on the next die roll or whatever. How does one individual player win?
So there's a couple of different ways that you can win. There's kind of a peaceful way and a more military way to win. That the peaceful way is, as Rich mentioned, you control multiple senatorial families that are a part of your faction, and you're tracking the amount of influence each of those families has, along with various other things as well. But ultimately, the more influence that senatorial family has, the more power they're effectively able to wield in the Senate. And ultimately, generally, senators start with, maybe 3 to 5 influence, somewhere in there. If you get to 35 influence and Rome survives the rest of the turn, then you are automatically consul for life and you are victorious. There is...
Before you go to the next one, have you ever had a game end with a 35-point victory?
Yes.
Okay.
I have.
Nice.
And it's... there are ways for factions to basically be able to buy additional influence by basically just spending money. You're technically getting influence for adding to Rome's treasury, which early in the game, that's a big part of the what you have to do to keep Rome alive, because Rome just doesn't have the funds to do everything it needs. So individual players are having to give back. But whenever you give money, you can buy influence. And so it is possible to kind of get to that point where you are able to start over a turn or two spending lots of money to buy influence and get there. The rub is that Rome has to survive, and usually the way Rome doesn't survive is there are 4 or more active wars at the end of the turn, and anytime that happens, Rome collapses, and so you can't just see Rome is on the brink of collapse and try to throw all of your money into influence, because you'll be named consul for life for a senate that no longer exists because the barbarians have trampled over Rome, or the Carthaginians, or whoever else. The second way that you can win, it's similar sort of thing. It's still being named consul for life, but instead of getting to that 35 influence, you get to 21 influence and become eligible for consul for life. And then the Senate has to hold a vote, and which would be composed of all of the players at the table, and vote you consul for life. And you might think that, why would anybody ever vote for you to win the game? And they wouldn't. But a cynic might say, as in all politics, you can buy votes. And so this is another way that you can essentially use your personal treasury to leverage some level of power that you've gained, and then get elected consul for life. The trick is that you have to also get the proposal out there in front of the Senate, and there's a process for bringing issues to the floor of the Senate, and the other players are going to generally not put you in a position to do that if it looks like you have a senator that's positioned and you've got big stacks of money on all of your senator cards that says, oh, they've got lots of money available to buy votes this round.
Nice.
Yeah, there's an.
Oh, good.
I was just going to say that's an interesting mechanic too, the monies, because every family has a lockbox that you can hide money in, and you can only take money in and out at a certain part of the game. And if you notice that another player is stacking money up high on his guys taken out of the lockbox, you know something's about to go down.
Yeah, and the rub with that is that senators can die for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And whenever they do, anything that's on their card out in play is just wiped from the game. So you've got a big stack of money on that senator, and the senator dies, then you've just lost that money. So the only safe place is the faction treasury, but you're limited onto basically at the start of the turn. You can access it and distribute funds in and out of it and around to different senators. So that information is secret, but big stacks of money on a senator are going to draw a lot of attention very quickly.
I feel like I need to add here that this victory path is possible, as speaking from firsthand experience.
Yes, especially if certain people.
Mitch, you just name him.
Okay, especially if Mitch miscounts money available, and that brings up another interesting strategic aspect of it, that money is a big part of your power in the game, and I think what Mitch was trying to do in that particular situation was force the person who ultimately won that game to spend a bunch of money, and then also force everybody else at the table, not named Mitch, to spend a lot of money, and basically now Rome's a little bit safer for everyone because nobody's going to be able to buy the
votes to win.
buy the votes to win.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance in, and we'll get to the final victory condition here in just a second. There's a lot of nuance in just the little things of the game because mechanically, sure, there's a lot of case rules and there's a lot of stuff maybe to look up. I mean, fortunately we play with you, Rex. You know the game. You've tricked out your copy. It's very impressive. But mechanically, you look at your senators' total votes, and you are appointing individuals to serve in various capacities. Rome consul to run the Senate, field consul to go fight wars, cult leader, name's forgetting me, to commit
Pontifex
sacrifice.
Maximus.
Yeah, right, which is insanely powerful, which I tried to persuade Rich all day last weekend to realize is Rex's power holding all these vetoes. And anyways, so you're pointing people.
Well, it's kind of hard when he's got all the vetoes. We can't really stop him from.
Right. And so everyone has these different roles that they take on, and that gives the individual senatorial family influence, and that's how you're getting up to this track. And so you put those people in those roles by holding votes. Well, my point is there's nuance with, Mitch trying to get everyone to spend their money down so no one can buy their vote. There's nuance in how votes are conducted. The most brilliant rule I think ever crafted is that the Rome consul can say, debate is closed, we're voting. You cannot vote on this you can't discuss this anymore. It's time to vote. And there's the nuance in the game, I guess, is what I'm trying to say as we talk about these things. Because there's a lot of things we're going to talk about. There's so many moving parts and so many things to negotiate and discuss. And it's when all those things come together that paint this just brilliant picture from, I'm going to try to assassinate you. Because it's Republic of Rome. Of course you're going to try to assassinate people.
Yes. And you don't need a card or any. You just yell out that you're going to assassinate somebody, and it can be any time that the Senate is in session. And if somebody's getting too powerful, at the end of the day, that is the last hope you have of maybe preventing a win, but it's still a way to stop somebody. But of course, there are consequences potentially to assassinating somebody, which can end up in the immediate capture and killing of the assassin senator and subsequent mandatory prosecution of that faction's leader, which is just a senatorial family card that has a little bit more staying power with a particular faction instead of just being recycled back to the pool. But it's one of the most surprising things about Republic of Rome is you, as an individual player, have virtually no individual specific player turn.
Right.
There is one phase where there's not a ton of decisions, but you're acting on behalf of your faction. You're drawing cards from the deck that kind of pushes the game forward. You are doing some things to attract some more votes and revenue sources to you, and potentially, maybe holding some gladiatorial games to increase your popularity with the lower classes of the population of Rome, which is also a big aspect of the game. You gotta keep the people happy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When we played last weekend, the first game ended pretty quickly because the people revolted.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we had to, I believe, name a dictator who had to basically give a speech, which in the game just means rolling on a certain table, which you do once a turn anyway. That's modified mainly by the unrest of the populace, and if that doesn't go well, then there's a popular revolt, and the Republic is no more very quickly.
There was a pretender king who was
Yes.
quickly no longer a pretender.
Yeah.
The people liked him a lot more than they liked us.
We were already rolling like shit, and then the game made us roll on the thing we were rolling on like shit on again, and that pushed us over the edge.
Yeah. But
So I think like mechanically it's a very loose game, right? And what I'm gonna bring this around to Rex and Rich is because you've both played John Company, I know that. Rex, I'm gonna remind you of a point you made to me when we were playing Downfall over the holidays that you read somewhere, and I'm probably gonna get this wrong. One of the differences. Oh, go ahead.
it was just something I said, but
Oh, okay. So this is an original Rex thought then.
I believe so.
Oh, very good.
It may be subconscious plagiarism, but it was an epiphany that I had.
Well, give us the epiphany then. I think it was brilliant.
So I think the difference between John Company and Republic of Rome, at a very base level, is John Company doesn't trust its players. And what I mean by that is John Company has a fairly rigid structure, where different people get to make different decisions at different times, and there is a very mechanical way in which you go through a John Company turn that works to keep all the players actively involved and feel like they're playing a board game, like any
Yes.
other board game.
Yes.
And Republic of Rome kind of just does away with that. There are things you can do, but the big decisions you are making as a player are often not at a certain point in the turn sequence. It's just things that you are doing throughout the game, when to play intrigue cards, when to yell that you're going to assassinate somebody. But ultimately, everything that impacts that central cooperative aspect of managing Rome itself is ultimately going to come down to a vote.
Yeah.
You can, in certain circumstances, when things look dire in terms of how many wars are in front of Rome, you can name a dictator, which dictator has a little bit different meaning at that time than what we think of as a modern dictator, because that dictator has a lot of power, and I believe that a dictator's proposal cannot be vetoed, if I'm remembering right. But either way, it still has to be voted on, and ultimately getting a block of votes is a huge part of the game. So if you and another player can get effectively half the votes in Rome, then that gives you a huge amount of power to kind of control the game. And there's different ways in which you can those votes can be adjusted, and essentially by you send a powerful senator out of Rome, to be a governor of a province or something, well, all of a sudden that faction is deprived of the votes that that senator had because that senator is no longer in Rome. And so everything is open for debate, and often in the early Republic, the votes are kind of a formality because you're just trying to figure out the best way to survive until the next turn.
Survive.
And I say, well, some of the votes. There can also, the start of each senatorial phase begins with the outgoing Rome consul nominating two successors, one who will become the Rome consul and the other who will become the field consul. And it doesn't matter where you're at in the game, that can be a fairly contentious vote. Even if Rome is not doing well and we know we need to send armies or whatever, there can still be a lot of back and forth about who's going to get it, because a lot of power comes with that, and that's one of the main ways you gain influence in the game. And of course, once you've been a consul, obviously you can be elected censor, which is the prosecutorial power in the Roman Senate. And so then you have to have a censor every turn who then, at a certain point in the sequence, the Rome consul turns over proceedings to the censor to prosecute anybody who may have taken
A little off the top.
some concessions from various outside influences, or merely held office last turn because you
got us in this mess, asshole.
Yeah, you can take as much money as you want from various sources, and that only thing that will deprive you is some influence, and you will lose the concessions that gave you that money, but you will still have your life. But if you held office, you are automatically eligible for a major prosecution, which, if successful, results in capital punishment. So it's
Yeah, and sometimes, like I was saying earlier, you can be eligible for major prosecution because you just went off and fought a war and saved Rome, and you're wildly popular for doing so, and the people love you, but the other senators certainly don't.
Yeah.
Which again, that's the nuance, and like, I don't want to. I have thoughts on the whole trusting your players because it is so true, but there are not many games where, again, this whole joke about victory mat, whatever, but like if I put that on the back burner, it's just like, I'm going to sit down for 13 hours and just be invested in whether or not Rome survives or not. There's nothing else like it. And it's through shit like that the narrative that develops, like, wow, we just went and kicked ass in that war and I got 10 or 5 popularity from that. And then everyone else hates you. I had a guy who was like massively popular, tons of influence early on in the game last weekend, and there was every attempt to shut him down.
Yeah. So, and I had a guy who went off, fought a big war. He was a huge hero and he died. And that was like, you two were so happy that you didn't have to deal with him anymore.
So if John Company has this structure in place, and another way I interpret that is John Company also doesn't kick you in the nuts. And Republic of Rome, for good or for bad, can just kick you when you're down.
Epidemics.
There's always a random senator who dies. Your senator can die if he goes and fights a war. You can be assassinated.
We had epidemics, which are a random event that took out like 4 senators, two out of like 3 turns.
Yeah, so people are dying left and right. You have there's just a lot of things, a lot of randomness, and sometimes it can be mitigated, sometimes it cannot be mitigated. But it just makes for such a great narrative, and you just have to be okay going into that. But I think, again, that's you probably don't have that in a 2023 2024 design, whereas, because I remember when we first played Rich, I think at one point you got down to like 2 senators
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we played with like a trusted group because you were in a point for the immediately foreseeable future. Rex could pick up Mitch and I as a vote, or Mitch and I could vote together, whatever. Basically, the three of us could have run the table, and however you voted did not influence any of those voting blocks.
Yeah. But
And
the other thing is there are mechanics. I mean, those senators are going to come back into the game.
yeah,
And if you ever lose too many senators where like everyone, I think it's if there's, is it 8 total senators or less, then they come back in even faster. Now
Yeah.
they're going to come back in reset of all their influence and popularity and everything, but the game does bring everything back in.
and my point to that is I think that's like a 30-year-old design choice. It's not a bad thing. I think it's good. I think, and I've always said this when we first started playing Republic of Rome, every time we've played it, I think I've made the comment that I think with Republic of Rome, you need a play group you trust and enjoy, because it doesn't have the structure.
Yeah, and it's more than just like that personal connection of a group you enjoy playing with. There are just certain styles of players that
Yeah.
it's because it's so freeform for most of it, it is easy to just kind of sit back and not do anything and not enjoy it unless you're actively trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? How do I do that? And, why would I do that? All those sort of things. And they're the different ways that you can win, and kind of the way it's not a victory point gathering exercise.
No.
There's nothing that is exactly like, I mean, influence maybe roughly, but you get influence on certain senators. It just isn't going to matter, because they're never going to probably be in a position to be the senator that gets you over the top. John Company, you're tracking victory points, and depending on how the company does, that may change how much certain things score for you and things like that. But throughout the game, you can kind of see where you stand relative to somebody else. And, um, you know, you mentioned Rich's poor fortune the first time we played, and that's a really bad position for a new player, first time ever playing the game, to be in.
Of course.
But that board position isn't necessarily the end of the world once you kind of know the game a little bit better, and it can be an advantage in certain situations. The way the game works, you send senators to fight wars. That winning those wars gets them popularity and influence, makes them more powerful, making you more reluctant to send those same senators out again and fight. And it if one player starts to build up enough of those, you don't even want to send anybody from that player's faction
Right.
out. And so you can leverage that table position weakness into a strength, as like, I'm not a threat to win right now, make me Rome consul, make me field consul to fight these battles. And you know that gives you maybe more agency over the actual decision making process in the game, and you can kind of start to steer things back to your favor to get a more favorable position back. But
Let me just interject here real quick, because that is the Rich Trappier strategy in
I
every
was
game.
just about to say, you
with
guys
the
refer to this
stupid
as the Rich
team.
Trappier strategy.
Oh my gosh, he is the king of like, oh, there's no chance I'm winning. I don't know what you're talking about, but
Yeah, he
but
does that whenever he's got like 7 senators
right,
all on the verge of.
yeah. So like, I think that's a good point, Rex. Whereas, but like, that's a nuance like you have to pick up. Like, how do you manipulate? And that's probably true of any stage of the game, even if it's early Republic where you're just trying to get them to survive. How do I manipulate my position on the table? Whereas, again, I think a modern design, and I love John Company. This isn't any kind of real critique of John Company in any way. It's just a lot of games will have that mechanism, the specific mechanic to get you back into the game, like, abundantly clear. Whereas in Republic of Rome, which is the beauty of Republic of Rome, it's how do you take what you have and weasel that way, and weasel the Rome situation for your benefit without
Right,
necessarily drawing all the wrath of every other senator, without getting stabbed in the back 30 times,
right. And, even another thing is saying that Rich didn't have um, the votes to really impact anything. Some of that in that particular game may have been we were playing that one 4-player. We played,
Right.
Hmm.
for unfortunate circumstances, we were only able to play 3-player last weekend. At 6 players, um, you get down, you may have the lowest vote total, but you might be that breakover point for 2 other people to be able to get the majority, and so you can be kind of that powerful swing vote, because the other factions are generally balanced in their voting blocks, and so that can still be a powerful position to be in if you know how to kind of use it to your advantage.
Yeah, the difference between 3 and 4 players was pretty significant. When
Sure.
we played last year with 4 players, there were lots of times that we were counting out votes,
Yeah.
spending money. And then when we played last weekend with 3, I think I remember like twice where we actually had a meaningful vote.
Yeah, it for the most part last week, I think we were always generally close enough that 2 players were always going to be an
Hmm.
overwhelming
Yeah.
majority, and that's just, if it wasn't last minute, and we were going to be at 3 players, we probably wouldn't have played
Right.
at all. 4 is definitely doable and enjoyable, but it's a game that the more players you have, the better it's going to be.
Okay. I could talk Republic of Rome all night, but we have more to get to, and we haven't even touched on it. I mean, really, we haven't. There's still, real quick, the last victory condition. You can come back from war, and you can basically lead an open revolt against Rome. That Rome, you have to defeat Rome with whatever troops they raise. Like, they get a chance to like raise up legions to fight against you, and then if Rome is at war with anything, you have to go clean up Rome's messes. That's the really brief rundown, but
Yeah.
that's I think the important takeaway when analyzing Rome, and we can go kind of around the table, just like final closing thoughts. Then we got to do the whole thing where we rank it. And I'll say right now, Republic of Rome is probably our biggest stretch we've ever done for war games in terms of every war game ever. I don't really care about that. It's an amazing game that I wanted to feature and rank, but you go fight wars.
Yeah.
It's just very, very, very
So, so
abstracted.
some of them are in North Africa, some of them are on the Senate floor.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You nailed it.
That's
So,
right.
I'll start, and then we'll go to Rich, maybe, and then Rex. Your final thoughts on. I assume we all enjoy it, but I think I've said it. It's a game of negotiation that. Well, my closing thought was just going to be the 13 hours just to see what happens. You know, we fired one game up last weekend and we lost right away and we immediately spun it up. The first year we played, I won at 5:00 and then we played for another 6 hours just to see what happens, to see if we could do something else. It's no game has ever gripped me like that and kept me so interested for that long and never really tiring of it, because just the player positions and how people act is always interesting. And again, the narrative, it's all so big picture, but it tells such a picture perfect narrative for the time period.
Well, it's like we had, and we played. We should say that last weekend we started off. There's a
Oh yeah,
prequel expansion, Birth of the Republic, I believe, is what it's called. And we started with it, and Rome is even smaller, but you're fighting smaller wars. But we had I think it might have been one of my senators went off to fight a war, got a victory result, and the most you can lose in terms of number of legions and still get a victory is 4. Well, we only sent 4 legions, and so all the legions were wiped out, and so that required some
well, then we lost our
navigation.
fleets. We lost 10 fleets like shortly after that too. Like we had to rebuild the entire fleet twice.
Yeah, but it was this general who went out and fought this war, comes back with no legions. It's like, yeah, I won that war. It's like, anybody to vouch for that? No, I won it. But there, you lose legions, and that's the number of mortality chits you have to draw, and so he did have to survive various chances of dying himself. But regardless, Rome would have won. But it because it was this prequel expansion, that's definitely not the case in the early Republic when you're fighting a Punic War you're having to send 15 or 20 legions to even try. And so it's just not even a thought that can cross your mind that you would come back victorious with no legions. But it's a great narrative element to the game.
It's a very somber victory.
Yeah.
Rich, let me know your thoughts as a whole.
Yeah, similar to yours. It's a very engaging game. It ramps up really well.
Yes.
And like Rex was just saying, we played the sort of prequel, but last year when we played, I don't know, are there 3 total eras, Rex?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we probably made it into the 3rd era last time. So you can really see the difference. I mean, it ramps up. Rome gets more powerful, but the enemies get more powerful. And yeah, you're sending a lot of troops out, which leads to those troops becoming loyal to the senator and the family. And, once the senator's got 6, 7, 8 legions that are loyal to him, hey, maybe we just go take Rome as our next war. So, the game just flows really well from as it builds and the enemies build and you move toward the victory conditions. It plays really well and it's very engaging.
Nice. All right, Rex, you're responsible for this beast.
So couple of thoughts. It's always sold as a negotiation game, and in a sense, it definitely is a negotiation game. But I think that can be a little bit misleading because it's not a commodity trading negotiation game. There can be some of that, but a lot of the negotiation that goes on isn't even necessarily a quid pro quo. There's always, I'll nominate you censor if you don't prosecute me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty common, but there's also just, as the outgoing Rome consul, that you've got to name 2 new senators to be consul. And it's probably going to be difficult for you to get the votes for that to pass if you nominate another one of your senators. And so you've got to spread that around. And the game does a fantastic job of providing you various incentives. That's one of the brilliant things about the way concessions work. Concessions are just a card. You play them on a senator. You take money from them. If you're prosecuted, they go back to the forum, but then they can be distributed out. And so your Rome console, and there's a bunch of concessions out there to distribute. It's like, well, I want this to pass. This is good for Matt and Rich, but it's not good for Mitch, and I need Mitch's vote too. Well, I can throw a concession in
Mm-hmm.
for Mitch to get him on board, but there's a lot of that aspect of just kind of, I think newer players tend to negotiate quid pro quo, this for that, much more often. Whereas once you kind of get a feel for the game, you're more not needing to make that explicit deal. You're just kind of doing it naturally to kind of spread the power around, kind of keep everybody happy. Um, while behind the scenes, you're Senator Palpatine accruing power to become the Dark Emperor at some point. You made a comment, Matt, earlier about being happy to just play all day and see Rome survive, and that aspect of
Uh-huh.
it. And I think that's very, very true. But another part of that, though, is what makes the game great, even if that's your goal, is, and I tell everybody I play with that I love this game, and until it's, we're way deep into the game and everybody's looking to quit anyway, I'm not going to try to win the game, because I would rather just keep playing
For the good of Rome.
for the good of Rome. But but you still need that threat of somebody potentially winning, that you have.
Agreed.
I mean, it's like, oh, we've got to do this, and there's just so many difficult choices. The game, you have individual family cards that are just kind of a senatorial family and doesn't represent any particular individual, and so those could be a stable family for the entire game, theoretically, never have their chit pulled. But you also have statesman cards, and these are individual um, historical personas that made a much bigger impact on Rome, like Scipio Africanus, Julius Caesar. Those statesmen often also have special abilities, benefits that can make fighting certain wars easier. The Punic Wars, well, any war generally has a couple of natural die rolls that basically negate the result. So it didn't matter how many legions you sent, you rolled this natural number, and so it's just considered a standoff or whatever it is, and you don't look at the combat table, you just look at something else. Wars can have leaders attached to them, like Hannibal and Hamilcar will come out and potentially help make the various Punic Wars more difficult. But the way the game is designed, those natural die rolls that are disasters are differentiated, so the ones Hannibal adds won't be the same as Hamilcar or what was on the base Punic War anyway. And so you can get into situations very quickly of you need a huge army, and then you need to actually roll relatively low to avoid all of those
Right.
disaster and standoff numbers.
Right.
And one of the ways to kind of how you get past that is a guy like Scipio negates those values. Now, in the published game, the statesmen are only supposed to negate the war values, not the leader values. We've always played, and I think it's a pretty common house rules that they negate everything, because that early republic is so
Brutal.
hard to get through anyway. But you need Scipio to go out and fight the Punic Wars, and
But you
so
probably used Scipio because he's so good earlier.
right. Well, and that's the rub, that it's like you're going to have 2 Punic Wars in the early republic, and fighting wars and winning them makes you more powerful, and so you're more reluctant to send the same person out. And so, and Scipio's got these really good values, but need to save him for the Punic War, or maybe his statesman card hasn't come out, but you don't want to send his family card out either, because he'll just get those values anyway. There's a timing on playing the statesman card, because once that statesman card dies, it's out of the game. And so you it came up over the weekend with some leaders for the Macedonian Wars, where I think you, Matt, had a family matched with a statesman I had in my hand, and I didn't want that statesman played at that moment, because those wars weren't out yet. And if I traded him to you and you played him immediately, and then something happened to him, well, now we don't have that ability. And so there's things like that really add to the experience of the game, and managing creates such a tension between, got to keep Rome alive, but that guy's going to be too powerful.
Right.
And okay, we don't have a choice, and then he wins the war, and then 5 out of the 6 people at the table are praying to the Pontifex Maximus, please draw his chit whenever you're deciding mortality at the end of the combat, and everybody cheers whenever he dies, and it's like you're victorious, but you're no longer a threat to the Republic either.
Yeah, that guy's dead. Yeah. I think you nailed it, Rex. It's that balance between your own personal goals and the co-op nature, one that makes those personal goals turn this from like super advanced states of siege into like an amazing game. And without that element of like, oh damn it, we need to do this, but that's gonna like set Rex up to maybe win in 3 turns, and it's like not even that big a risk. But you're always keeping your eye on it. I think you're exactly right. Okay, Rex, we have a list.
You do.
We do, and it's a list of every war game ever made. 75 of them, ranked from the very best, the U.S. Civil War, all the way down to the bottom. And here's how it works. Usually, Rich and I, we put on our little aprons, we spin up the clay wheel, we get it turning, and Rich and I rank a game. But tonight, we thought we would invite you on to help us find the rightful home for Republic of Rome, which will be interesting because I know you don't agree with everything that we have on our list. Well, not on our list, where it's at on our list, I should say.
You keep misspelling that number 1 game, but I don't know why you put the U.S. in there, but details aside.
All right, are either of you, and this is going to take, so it's completely objective, which means actually nothing because it's not completely objective. Yeah, we do the whole joke every time. It's the same stick. We have a list. It's objective, yada, yada, yada. Are either of you even thinking outside like a top 10 here? Like, this is so near the top for me.
So, for context,
Yep.
me personally, and I have a non-standard BGG rating, where most games are very, very low numerically. I have 3 games rated a 10, and Republic of Rome is one of them.
Real quick, what are the other 2? 1832?
Yeah, and Dune.
Dune, okay, nice.
Wow.
Awesome.
So I try to rank series instead of individual games for stuff like OCS. OCS is a 9.
Okay.
GCACW is a 9. Axis Empires is a 9. Just so my what little my input has I would play Republic of Rome before anything in the top 10 of your list.
And most of the things in the top 10, I should say and clarify for you, I feel like most things in our top 10 are all things you like. GCW, OCS, Next War, those are like, I think you like Line of Battle, maybe not as much as me, but
no, I like all of those games. The only game I have not played Silver Bayonet.
Oh, okay.
For just because I have too many games more than anything.
Because Mitch let me win that Republic of Rome game that one time.
Yeah, I'm not going to play a Mitchell Land game. I think you're probably a little bit higher on like Zokbon stuff.
Sure.
Than I am, but I think top 10. I might quibble a little bit with you on Next War title choices within that subgenre, but Next War in general, all of those big fans. So
nice. Okay, Rich, I'm curious about you.
Yeah, so definitely top 10 game. I mean,
okay.
The only thing is, so our first multiplayer game is Here I Stand at 12.
Yeah. Right.
And as good as this game is, it's, we've got a lot of 2-player games on here. We have games that can be played multiplayer, but they're basically 2-player games here.
Sure.
It's obviously it's harder to get a multiplayer game to the table, especially when you're talking about this kind of commitment. So that it is a fantastic game. But I kind of take that into account as well as, how easy is it to get to the table. So that would be the only, I don't even want to call it a knock on it, but just a qualifier for it. And then in the 2 experiences that I had, it did seem to play better at 4 than 3. And I think it would be even better with more players. So
here's one thing I want to add on to your caveats.
Yeah.
Rich. We're fortunate enough to play with the limited print edition.
That is true.
From the Rex printing. There are so many quality of life improvements that Rex has implemented that you won't find in either box, whether you're playing the Valley Games edition or that One Hill edition. And I'm trying to I don't think anything changes how I interpret the game, but it does just make things that much smoother. So everyone listening, just take that as a caveat. Rich, I agree with you, but the reason Pacific War for me is number 2 isn't because of the little scenarios, right? It's everything you can do with Pacific War and the narrative Pacific War tells.
I agree. Yeah.
And so
my favorite scenario is a smaller one, but Guadalcanal in Pacific War.
Yeah.
Because I think that's I know we're talking about a different game now, but the point I'm making is that it's not just the big stuff, and it's obviously not the little stuff. It's like you said, it's what you can do with the game.
Okay. I get that. My point is going to be it's the harder to table to stuff. I don't necessarily always gauge the tabling difficulty. Here's why U.S. Civil War has always been my number 1 game. It's the narrative and the exploration of things. Ooh, if I shoot the Cumberland Gap, what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. If I mess around in Missouri, dedicate all my resources in Missouri, good luck. But sure, go explore it and just see what happens. And it tells us, usually you're coming down to one decisive battle because your margin of victory is so thin, and so you're taking that same kind of narrative that I'm talking about with the Republic of Rome, and then you get it Civil War. I think you get a lot of that in Pacific War as well. I think Pacific War has an amazing narrative once you're able to get the game down.
And honestly,
you're going to have to talk me down from number 1, Rich, is where I'm at. And I think Rex would probably say number 1. I really am. That's where it's at for me.
Really?
Yeah.
There one interesting point about the experience that popped to mind compared to something like Here I Stand and other multiplayer games and the narratives that they drive. An interesting thing I had never really thought about in Republic of Rome, there can be very big die rolls that are just huge narrative drivers about, but it's different than Here I Stand, where it's me rolling against Rich, and it's going to turn out bad for one of us, whether it's me rolling really well and winning the battle and maybe the game, or Rich rolling well and me bad, vice versa. But Republic of Rome is interesting in that the vast majority of the actual die rolls you're making throughout the game, everybody wants those to succeed.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic because it doesn't matter. All the players are probably going to have a pretty similar
That's an interesting point.
recollection of it. Whenever you're talking about the game afterwards, is like, oh, we were so close. It's
Except for the guy being assassinated. Like,
well, yeah.
Five of the 6 players are all over the dice.
That's a good point, though, because I mean, everybody wants to win the war. Everybody wants to keep the people happy, and then everyone except for one person wants that general who just won the war to die in the process.
Right, and you don't. That creates a different sort of. It's like a narrative camaraderie among everybody, because it's usually what happens is you've just gotten through the early Republic by the skin of your teeth, and you're still fighting wars from then, and it's like, okay, there's 5 wars out there, so we have to defeat 2 of them, and you're everybody's min-maxing everything to try to figure out the best odds, and it's like, okay, field console, you make your roll first, and we'll see. And it's like, oh, got an 11, just so then the Rome consul has to make his roll in the war he's fighting, and it just misses or just makes it, but it's kind of a shared moment that is also a part of this extremely competitive game. So it creates different, I would say, more memorable narratives. I have very distinct memories of virtually every Republic of Rome game I've played over the past. Probably the first game was just before pre-COVID, whenever started playing with groups, and then played it at AAC Con, and started introducing many quality of life improvements to just keep everybody focused on the game itself rather than all of the bookkeeping and everything else you have to do.
Sure. So, Rich, if I can try to persuade you to go as high as possible, in addition to what Rex just said, this shared lasting narrative, and U.S. Civil War is tons of lasting narrative for me personally. There's so many battles that I still remember, but a lot of times we talk about how does a game make us feel, not in like this makes me feel warm inside, but like reading Mary Beard, listening to History Rome podcast, and having these moments where it's like you have a senator with -9 popularity, everyone fucking hates him, he dies, and then you bring him back in the fold. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna adopt that guy's name, and it's like, why? But it's also, it's like you're adopting these failing names, and then it just like it carries thematically. It just is so brilliant. I think so much thought just went into the little nuance. It is far from a perfect game. Far from a perfect game. But damn, is it good. So how high are you willing to go, Rich?
So, I mean, here's the thing. If you two had not said anything and you were just going to ask me where it would go, I'd probably put it at 3. Because I like Pacific War a little better. I think Pacific War, to me, Pacific War is the best game on our list. We've already talked about this. When we did Pacific War last year, I wanted it number one. That's fine. I'm not going to
I
argue
don't
about
remember
it.
that.
But the fact that you want to put it number one actually really surprises me. I mean, I know how much you love the game, and we're talking about a absolute top tier game. So if you like it at number one, I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah, I think
it deserves to be up there. So
it's not a Hex Encounter war game, and it's not the best war game. But in terms of game experience, I think it is the best thing I've ever played.
And what has always kind of put it over the top for me is that there's just nothing else like it. There's Pacific War has a lot of really unique aspects at it, but like you say, at its core, it's a Hex Encounter war game, and it's going to give you a lot of the same sort of experiences, narratives as a lot of other Hex Encounter games. Same with the U.S. Civil War.
Yeah, all the strategic Civil War games are great, right? Like in their own right. So like
right.
you can find one that you like that does it the best.
And those particular games are exemplars in their category or their niche, but Republic of Rome just stands out as like, you have not played anything like this, and if this game clicks for you, it's going to just knock your socks off.
Rich, I'm going to leave it complete with you with one final thought, and you can put it 1 or 2, unless you're like really set on it being above Pacific War. Here's the only reason why I wouldn't put it number 1. I could probably sit down with someone who is maybe an introvert, maybe really shy, hasn't played a lot of games like this, and teach them U.S. Civil War and get a good experience for both of us out of it. Republic of Rome is so group dependent that I could not do that with someone I don't like. I could not play the game with someone who just like does thing like Rex said, it's not necessarily so much that you have to like the people you play with. They just have to play the game well, in the sense of like not be an asshole, and kind of also make sure that people have a good time, because it doesn't have the rigidness. So with that in mind, it is 100% up to you where it falls finally. My vote is number 1.
Yeah, and that's the first thing I said on it. That's why I was talking about Here I Stand, because that's always the problem with multiplayer games.
Yep.
If you want to call it that, it's not fair to say it's a problem, but
well, it's the nature of it, right? It's the same thing with like coin doesn't necessarily escape it. Like you can have someone can really tank a coin experience, and then you still have hop on the leader, and that still happens here. It's just more. The hop on the leader is more nuanced because you're also just like trying to survive. I don't know. But
no, let's do it.
Number 1.
We have a new Pontifex Maximus.
Wow.
The white smoke is burning.
Going to take a 2/3 vote to impeach him. So
Rex is going to veto if we ever try to
make
anything else number 1.
Clear Rex's vetoes before we started this process. Rex said, anyways, I don't even want to talk about it. Oh my gosh. This is a big moment, gentlemen.
Wow.
53 episodes, U.S. Civil War stood as...
Is that what episode we're on?
We were on 57,
but
I ranked
50.
it.
Yeah,
I didn't start the list until episode 4. So,
yeah.
Well, outstanding stuff. Rex, thank you so much for your time and coming on and talking about Republic of Rome.
All right. On the next episode, we'll talk about Republic of Rome. Is it a war game?
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, I'm not ready for that conversation.
Just ready for the, and I've already forgotten what the name of the speech in the population phase, to see if the peasants with their pitchforks come and overthrow you and reset the every war game ever list back to what they believe it should be.
I will tell you that I bet Republic of Rome, when we do the popular vote, when we do the contest, that it may be a while till it moves on to the Master Series.
That's okay.
It's right. I don't want it to get like John Company. I love John Company, but that's already for the masses, right? Like everyone's playing that. I'm cool with being a little Republic of Rome hipster.
Yeah.
Just wait until we play Republic
Rex
of
played it
Carthage.
before it was cool, though.
Republic of Carthage. Yeah, that's true. When we play Republic of Carthage, you become the ultimate Republic of Rome hipsters. Oh, like you're still playing
I,
Republic of Rome?
and I should say that it is 100% because of Callendale's videos on the Republic of Rome that I ever got into Republic of Rome, and I had it and messed around with it solo for a handful of times, um, never dreaming that I would have a group to actually play it with. And now I have played with probably 15 different people, give or take, that I think have really enjoyed the experience and want to make it a every con or gathering, just a standard game. So it's something that with the right group isn't just like, oh, that was a fun, we should play it sometime, and then you never do. It's like, no, we're doing this year at this convention again. So it's all Callendale's fault. Send your hate mail to him. He'll have no idea what you're talking about, which will make it even better.
Awesome. Outstanding stuff. Well, Rich and I have the rest of an episode to record, and that's an hour, 15 minutes of excellent Republic of Rome, which is like enough to work through Rick Kelly's deck construction rules once.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Thanks, Rex.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Rex.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
If I known all it took to dethrone U.S. Civil War was coming on the podcast, I would have been on episode 5.
Now, hold on. Listen up here, folks. I don't want to get the wrong idea, right? This is a very special occasion, okay? This is not how you dethrone. U.S. Civil War is still number 2, all right? We're going to be very clear about this.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I
no,
really
thanks,
had
Rick.
a good time.
I mean, I guess we didn't really leave, though, because we were in the recording. But you get what I mean. So, yeah.
Hey, this time we played a clip, and I actually remember what we talked about. So.
You had heard this one before.
Yeah.
Oh, I love an end of the year one. Like, that is now my new favorite bit, where you just pretend to listen. That
was so fun. We should do another game.
It is. Do you just don't even want to process the new number 1?
I think that's pretty cool. I was really surprised to hear you say it should come in at number 1. I mean, I knew it was going to be top 10. I thought it would probably slot in the top 5 somewhere.
Well, I mean, our list is completely objective, Rich.
That's
and
true.
I did not want my own personal bias about the U.S. Civil War clouding the list. Right.
There we go. I mean, yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. So now on to, although we'll probably spend less time talking about the star of the show, the main featured game, if you will, the patrons pick. Rich, this was your nomination, so why don't you tell everyone about it?
All right. Yeah, I'll talk about it. So this game is called, say, I'm big with the subtitles today. Like I had a long book. Now I'm doing a long game title. Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich, 1942 to 1945. Now this is a game that takes place in Europe during the last part of World War II, if you couldn't tell. John Butterfield, Chad Jensen, Kai Jensen. I'm not sure. So I wonder, I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do. Was this a Chad Jensen game that they picked up after his passing, or were they all working on it from the beginning? Do you know?
So yeah, interesting story about that. Finish your tidbit, and then we'll get into that.
Yeah, art by Chad Jensen, so I'll have to add him to the list of artists that I know for future War Game games. And, of course, Mark Simonich. It's a GMT game, just came out last year, 2023, very end of last year.
Yeah.
Slipped it in and end of the year. So, yeah, and it's obviously, it's a World War II game. You're going to talk about the big idea behind the game, but you play the Western Allies, the Soviet Allies, and the Germans, but in a unique way.
Yeah, and I'll get to the lineage of the game real quick, and I want to touch on that unique way because It's a 2-player asymmetrical game, which you're like, that's like every war game, Matt. But here's the kicker. Here's the brilliant thing about Downfall. You yourself are playing 2 separate asymmetrical games. You're playing one Western power and one half of Germany. It's brilliant. So, how this game come about? There's an interesting story in the back of the rulebook, and that's where I wanted to start because I thought it was pretty good. So, I guess John Butterfield was over at the Jensens, and he saw the game. And he looked in and he goes, how many players? 3? Chad Jensen says, no, 2. John Butterfield says, Allies versus Axis? Chad says, no, Western Allies versus Soviets. The West also controls the Axis against the Soviets, and the Soviets control the Axis against the West. And then there's more to it. But eventually, after Chad passed away from pancreatic cancer, Kai sent the files to John Butterfield, who then finished the design.
Okay.
And yeah, so big picture, Rich is right. This is back part of World War II. It's the downfall of Nazi Germany. U.S. player is controlling Western faction, U.S., UK, Commonwealth, you get it, and the OKH faction. So they are fighting the Russians and fighting the OKW faction in the West, who are controlled by the Russians. Russian players then fighting, obviously, the OKH faction. So you have this bipolar game where you are both aggressively attacking and furiously defending, because what is so enjoyable about this game for me is you are constantly getting kicked in the teeth as the German player, because this is the downfall of the Germans. So you've already hit your high water mark. You're getting your ass kicked, but then you're also doing the ass kicking at the same time. So it's both brutal and enjoyable. And then it uses a brilliant activation system using initiative, where you select different actions from a chip pool, and they will cost you different amounts of initiative. Whoever's lowest on the initiative track will then go next. Different points as the counters move past different points on the initiative track that will trigger events. Events basically last for 3 cycles, and that can change what air is present on the map. Die roll modifiers, who's controlling like the Nazi air. At the same time, you're drawing cards, you're battling it out. This is strategic scale. That's big picture. Miss any like big stuff, Rich?
The other thing the events do is they provide objectives that, like, you want to have certain things done before the event card comes up.
Yes.
And then if you don't, it's going to get shuffled back in. It's going to come up again. But like, you want to have North Africa cleared by the time that card comes up. You want to have like a Soviet Union in Romania by the time that card comes up, and it'll force the game to move along. Like, you know, it'll change the status of the game in positive ways for whoever satisfied that condition.
Yeah, what's like really cool, and I've talked about this, is like if you meet the condition on one event, that will shuffle a new historical event into the deck, and that historical event will advance the Mediterranean War. So if you've made enough progress and you've landed in Italy, it actually shuts down the whole. So like, not only are you moving troops, you're gaining reinforcements, you're moving, attacking, you're also doing like a whole strategic warfare scale that involves fleets and air. And one of those is the battle for the Mediterranean. At a certain point, once the Allies have made enough progress in the Med, you just cut off the Mediterranean strategic track, which is so brilliant. And I've talked about that. Like, you just, at a certain point, games need to cut like the parts you don't care about off anymore.
Yeah. And it matters not just for the attacker, but the defender too, because if you're playing the Germans in North Africa, you have to decide when to pull those units out of there.
Right. Yeah.
Because
and that's,
you don't want to lose like your big Panzer army because you waited too long.
and when I played this opposed, I did. And then I learned the lesson, because like I got no one out of Africa because I was so worried about triggering naval responses, when really that shouldn't, like, I should get them out of there. And I tried to hold on as long as possible. But that's kind of the deal. Like, you're playing this on your German front, what can I possibly hold on to? It's not a question of when you get overrun, but it's a race, right? The game goes until either the Russians or the Western powers meet their victory condition. Okay, so it's how do I get there first as the attacker, and how do I make enough road bumps so my opponent doesn't get there?
Yeah. And you can also the other cool thing about the events, I think, is that if your opponent has a really good event, like it gives them, 2 planes and a positive die roll modifier or something, well, you can play, assuming you have the chits available, you play a recruit chit, something with a huge initiative.
Yeah.
So that you start zooming past your own events to get those cards out of there faster, which I think is cool.
Yeah, so it introduces like a whole meta game, right? So
Yeah.
actually, what's interesting, if you look at the rule book, the war game rules in the rule book are actually there's not that many of them. I think there are
Yeah, I
some,
mean, it's like ground combat is really the only section that
right, and
yeah.
there's actually interesting rules with combat. And if you read the designer notes, I think John Butterfield said that like Chad's biggest hang up with the game was getting combat right. I think it does it very right. I think they nailed it. But most of the game is more about the initiative counters and what they do. So I guess that kind of ties into the war
Yeah,
game part
because
of
the
it. But
initiative determines what actions you can take.
right, and so it's like explaining all the like 12 different chits that are there and what they do, reinforcements, move and attack, those types of things. But it introduces a metagame where not only you're deciding like, oh, I need reinforcements right now. Oh, but that's going to bump me up 18 on the track. What are the ramifications of taking this action? And if you really want an action, but it's back further in the line, you got to pay more time. And so there's
Yeah.
a domino effect of the things that are going to trigger, and now who's up in the turn. Do I take a less effective action and maybe get like a back-to-back
Yeah.
action or something like that? It's really interesting.
And there is one planning spot that you can
Yep.
use to mitigate that a little bit, but you don't have complete control.
Yeah. So just real quick, what you can do with those and what you can do on your turn. Usually it's something like a move only, move and attack, then move. Like these are the specific action counters you're selecting. Reinforcements. There's some that like mess with the other player, like adjust their initiative. There's some that are
Mhm.
completely tied to the strategic warfare mini game. A
And
lot
there
of
are
things
some
are.
that are two-sided,
Yep, that's
so
what I
you
was gonna
can
say.
yeah, sorry.
No, that's great because I think like some like you're foregoing in some cases you're foregoing doing one thing to do the other thing. Um, and then like if you have none of your actions out there, you can like reseed the pool and things like that.
Yeah.
And eventually you'll take enough, everyone will get far enough along that it will trigger kind of all right, refresh, shuffle the event decks, here we go again.
Yeah. So the turn is basically it's divided into 3 weather
Yep.
cycles, and I haven't counted. How many events do you get in a turn?
Well, it
Probably each
depends.
section gets 2 maybe? I'd have to look at the
Oh,
actual
you mean how
board.
many different like oh
Yeah.
No, I've never counted that either.
It's probably 2 or 3 per faction, I
Yeah.
would guess. But yeah, then once you make it all the way through, uh, and it's all tracked on the side of the board. But once you make it through the 3rd weather cycle and you basically flip back up, let everybody catch up, and then you go into the next turn, which, you get reinforcements and you get a different weather cycle and things like that. So it could be like the first turn the weather's just all snow no matter what, and then the second turn you get like mud, and then you get nice weather after that. So the turns all have their own weather. You don't like roll on it or anything. It's all preset.
Yeah. More specific, just like in terms of moving in combat. It's got a very interesting, somewhat brutal, restrictive, if you will, zone of control system. It
Yeah, that is
is
interesting. It's spines instead of like a Zoc bond or something like that. Basically, every
right,
hex, look at it like it's a little star with the spines sticking out.
and you can't cross the spines, and
Yeah,
you can't negate the spines either.
right.
And so, if you're going to encircle someone, you gotta like swing wide is the consequences. But you can make some pretty strong defensive positioning, which I like again because most of your counters is going to be army. You have some cores, you have partisans, I guess, but those don't really like factor into combat so much. And what I mentioned is a lot of strategic scale games miss the mark on me in combat resolution, and this hits it. It's satisfying. There are both a lot of strength modifiers as well as die roll modifiers, and there's a There's a way you track that on the game board because you're doing a lot
Yeah.
of them.
Which I first saw that in Next Door, and I just love those two chits.
Yeah.
To track the columns and the DRMs.
Yep. Agree 100%. It's, yeah. So I really enjoy combat resolution. There's nothing crazy about it. Basically, you get your main attack, and then every unit you declare as a joining the attack is a flanker, and they contribute 1 to the strength. It's not anything overly complex. I will say that the player aid card is one of the best I've ever played with.
And not just the card, but the information on the map.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic.
Yes.
You know, they've got tracks all over the place, but it's not too busy. It's just everything that you need is there.
Everywhere. Yeah. I mean, the player card allows you to just play the game without doing a lot of like lookup, even with some of the things like partisans, right? When I first started playing the game, I didn't do a whole deep dive in the partisan stuff, but it's there and it walks you through it. And obviously all your combat modifiers, those things are on there. Just a great presentation all around and great quality. Like the counters, you don't have to clip them. They're great deluxe counters. When you punch the game for the first time, I didn't get a chance to tell you this before you punched yours. It's in the order of the setup card.
Which is amazing. I wish I would have known that.
Right. So like if you're like, oh, I'm going to go buy this, like the first time, if you're doing the full game, there's really 2 scenarios. You can either do the full game or
Overlord.
Thank you. I was like, what is that word to like kind of speed up the game? But yeah, it's just a lot of quality of life improvements, just little things like that. And it's got setup cards, which I think every game should have.
Yeah. It's two map. I mean, one map, but 2 map size is what I'm trying to say. So, not too big, fits on a table, but I mean, it's borderline monster as far as like, if you want to play the full campaign, it's going to take a while. So
that is my biggest knock against the game. It actually came up somewhere else today, and I think someone pointed out like it's got 4 hours listed, and there's just like there's no way
that's a
in
4-hour game. Yeah,
no, it is very long. I also, my first play of this was opposed. Oh no, they have it at 360 to 720 minutes. Okay, that's way different. Yeah, that's like 6 hours is also pushing it too, unless you're playing Overlord. 12 hours. Yeah, I think you can, if you're really good at this, it whizzes by. I think the game just moves at a great pace because you're constantly just like bouncing between factions. I completely forgot what my other complaint was going to be. You take it. I don't know where I was going with that.
Complaints. I don't think I have any complaints. One other thing I was just going to say about the initiative system is so basically you have a choice of chits, and you have to pay more if you don't take the lowest chit or whatever, but you can get to a situation where there's no chits on the board that you can even play or whatever. And basically you just get to, for free, you get to reseed them, throw everything back in the cup, pull them back out and stuff like that. And if you're way behind in initiative, you can actually strategically decide, well, I'm going to get to go twice in a row if I do this, so I can move my guys into position and then I can attack and cool stuff like that. So there's some cool stuff you can do with the initiative chits.
Very clever interplay, just all around. Just even it's got like a level of elegance that I didn't foresee. With just kind of how brilliant, how interconnected everything is. Again, like the domino effect, like you don't see it right away at first, but then you're like, oh, if I do it this way, that's then going to affect this, which there's just a really elegant game design here. I know what I was going to say. I have since my one opposed play, this has been all solo for me. And with the card play in combat, and I will say, as elegant as this game is, the card play is the least elegant because you just end up with like 20 cards in your hand because they don't always
and it's not a CDG. The cards
no, they're like combat modifiers.
They're all combat cards, basically.
Almost.
I mean, there's combat and HQ. That's right. You can use cards to like cancel other cards and things like that. But
breakouts. You can do a breakout.
Yeah, they're basically all combat cards.
Yeah.
I mean, so And you draw those depending on what action card comes up. So yeah, you do end up with a bunch in your hand.
You end up with a
they're not-
bunch, and some of
they're
them are
not
very
huge.
specific when you
Yeah.
can play them. So it gets a little unruly. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's just like with how elegant it is, it's kind of like, oh, and then I'm holding 20 cards.
Yeah.
So the
Especially
game
the
loses.
Russians. Seems like the Russians get a lot.
Yeah, yeah. The game loses some of the card play excitement and also some of the tension with the initiative track because you can't trick yourself as much, or you're like, not so much a trick, but this game is best at 2 players, and there's no doubt about it. It's fine as a single player game, but play this game opposed if you get the chance. It's well worth it.
Yeah. I've been playing against my daughter opposed. We're both having a good time. We're both liking it. I've been playing single player just on Vassal, which they made a bunch of updates to Vassal. I think 1.8 came out today. So
nice.
The game's only like 3 months old, and they've got 8 updates to the Vassal module already. So
yeah, I think people are a big fan of this one. It's fantastic. Do you have any other knocks against it or anything else you want to say? I mean, it's a great game.
No, I don't have any knocks against it. I mean, it is what it is. It's not a sandbox like as much as Unconditional Surrender Europe, or definitely not as much as Axis Empires. Yeah. So it's not as sandboxy as those. I mean, obviously you still do have freedom, but it's not as much as those, I would say. It's more of a straightforward, I mean, the point of the game is Germany's done for. Who's going to get, whether it's going to be Western or Russian, who's going to get the most VP and eat up as much of Germany as soon as possible on the way. And it's very entertaining doing just that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's entertaining. It's surprising just how good it is, and it's interesting. The metagame is very interesting. And it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, I think the more you get to know the cards and the counters, probably the more you would. I'm not going to say it's going to become more sandboxy, but the more you'd be able to try some different things and see. But it's always going to have some randomness with what shits and cards are coming up to. So.
I mean, the West is going to have the most sandbox, right? Because they have all the different beaches they could potentially hit as long as they meet the threshold for landing there. The Soviets,
and they have the strategic warfare tracks that the Soviets don't mess with. So.
Right. So that's another just little nuance. The West messes with the strategic tracks, and the OKW messes with the strategic tracks. The OKH and Russians do not.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. A little nuance. Recommended reading. This was tough for me because you're doing such a whole thing. I'm just going to throw out Second World War by Anthony Beevor. It's a great total telling of World War II. I'm sure it misses on some things that people want more detail on, but if you just want a whole snapshot of World War II, I like Beevor's book a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say the Atkinson Liberation Trilogy.
That's great.
Which, ironically, I haven't read the third one yet. So in this one, is mostly the third one. Although the second book talks about Italy, and when this game starts, if you play the full campaign, the Allies have not taken Italy yet. So second into the third book.
Okay, folks, we rushed through the description last time. It doesn't work as well with 3 people because someone's left out. They're not spinning the wheel. They don't get their hands on the clay. We have a list. We do
have a list.
Every war game ever made, ranked from best to worst.
Wait, what's the number one game ever?
The number one game ever. As it stands, don't make me regret any of this, Richard. Don't push your luck. Number 1, Republic of Rome. Number 76 is U.S. Civil War. Just kidding.
It's still Zeppelin Raider.
Here's
Last weekend, you were telling me about a game that might be competition for Zeppelin Raider. I don't remember what it was, but you told me you might have one that was competition for it.
It was Dien Bien Phu.
Oh, is that one? Okay, that's right. Okay. I couldn't remember which one it was, but yeah. Okay. This one will not be number 1, and it will not be number 76. So,
well, who's to say it won't be number 1? But here's how it works. Rich and I don't know because the list is completely objective. Okay, we fire up the clay wheel, we wet our clay, we stick our hands out. At some point, someone gets blindfolded. All that stuff, and we merely are the arbiters the shapers, the molders of the clay that is the Every War Game Ever list. So here we are, Rich. I have a spot in mind, but I want to play the game where I make you go first.
Well, I want to ask a question because
Sure.
one of my biggest regrets is that I have not played Axis Empires.
Okay, yeah.
So you have. I mean, and I think that that's probably a good place to start the discussion.
I didn't even think about Axis Empires. I was thinking higher.
Yeah, and I was too, but Axis Empires seems like such a logical comparison to it.
I have read through the Axis Empire rules, the new version. I'm very excited to get the opportunity to play the deluxe edition someday. Hasn't happened yet, like I thought it would. I think this is a more streamlined, a more elegant, a more not the meta game, but the game within the game. The game of the initiative track is maybe more gamey, but also more interesting and directly impacting the game than some of the little mini games you play in Axis Empires, like the Spanish Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
That's like it could get interesting, but chances are in my plays it always kind of like seemed to resolve itself. For my taste, I would pick this.
Okay.
For now.
So we'll call that a floor. Here's where I would go with this.
Okay.
Looking at the list, the game that I think, now they're not similar games, but when I look at this list, the game that kind of sticks out to me as being similar in quality to this one is Korea, The Forgotten War.
Okay. We're not too far off at all.
Which that's number 17.
I had it right below Stalingrad.
Okay.
But I would easily be talked into going above Stalingrad.
Yeah, I would go above Stalingrad 42. I like this one better.
All right. Yeah, that's just different, right? Then because you're talking about Korea, which is the Grognard's war game, right? OCS. Mm-hmm. You're picking up supply, you're moving supply, you got everything flying all around. You know, it's so much more detailed. This is innovative and has action selection. So obviously it's borrowing some Eurogame tropes, if you will. I don't know. That's probably a really good comparison. Which would you go? I
think I like Korea better. So I think I like this at 18.
I think I like it 18 too. I was just about to say the deal with Korea is you have 20 different scenarios you could play and you could do one in an afternoon. Yeah. You're not playing this in an afternoon.
Mm-hmm. And OCS is just so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a whole, I think I just like Korea more. Yeah, that was right on. Nice. Let's do it. Number 18.
All right.
Downfall. Episode 57. Rich, we have 77 games ranked on our list. How many more do we have to go?
I guess we can stop if we do 77 more. Or if we just run out of games because we've both rated everything that we have.
Nice. Well, we got a long way to go either way.
Yeah. I probably have some stuff pre-ordered that will increase that number.
Oh, yeah. Shit's flying in all the time. I at least know what we're talking about next month. 1, maybe 2 games. First off, we've already talked about it. NATO, the Cold War goes hot. Compass games. That will either be in March or April. Maybe April just because of the size of the game. In addition to that, our patrons have voted. A pick has been made. And Rich, you're back-to-back nominee champ.
How about that?
All right, go ahead and tell them. What'd they win?
This game, we've actually already talked about it today. I'm giving everyone a second to guess what it is. It is Men of Iron Norman Conquests.
Awesome. I'm happy. I'm just sad that my nomination lost.
Think the shrink is going to come off tomorrow? I'm not check that rule book. So actually, I'll ask you, since you played it, I mean, I know, like, even in the tri-pack, they've all got their own separate rule books and stuff like that. Is it like that? Does it feel like just another game? And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I know if I know how to play Men of Iron, is it just another? Yep. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Still using the same tri-pack rules. They've cleaned up a couple
Perfect.
things and made the distinctions for Norman Conquest, and then there's the scenario book.
Perfect.
Yeah, and most everything is like color coded for the scenario. I think there's more crossover here. It's less like distinct. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's not in Battles of the American Revolution, you get a counter sheet per battle. Whereas here, I think you'll use some counters between separate battles. I've only played what did I say I played? That one battle that everyone knows. Hastings, thank you. Yeah, nice. So next month, at least Men of Iron Norman Conquest. Hopefully NATO. If not NATO, we could just get pushed back 1 month. So another busy month, but another month of great war games. If you want a say in what we play, you can head over to patreon.com/historytable, where we have a poll that runs every month, and that's where things like that happen. Wow. I was going to say we're flying through the episode, but we have a whole nother like hour segment to plug in here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the point we're gonna shove Downfall off the table and all the other stuff that was on the table, and we're gonna talk about other stuff on the table. That made no sense. We're gonna talk about the other things we played and enjoyed. All right, Rich, I bet you want to talk about High Frontier.
Okay. This was almost my HotT Blooded.
Nice. Yeah, that's how I felt after I played.
I cannot stop thinking about this stupid game, and I don't mean stupid at all, because it's good, but I can't stop thinking about High Frontier for all. I've spent way too many brain cycles playing the game, and way too many brain cycles since I played the game just thinking about it. So yeah, High Frontier for all. If you don't know anything about this game, it is a sci-fi game about exploration and conquest and industrialization of the solar system. And it's really cool and interesting and difficult and sometimes very frustrating. And it's living in my head rent free right now. So
yeah, I think it's when I was all horned up for High Frontier, it's a game that you take satisfaction even in failure, especially when the failure is like something you could have prevented. I get it, like if a pad explosion happens and you lose a rocket, that sucks. But if it's something like, oh, I could have done that better, I get like so much satisfaction. It's like, then we're going back to space, baby. We're gonna do it right this time. It's good. And then just like mechanically, it's a game that also just works on, so like narratively and planning, and then just the steps, the mechanics, they just work. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and I don't even know what else to say about it. I mean, it's a beautiful game on the table, especially when you've got the big play mat. But I've seen it without the play mat too, and it still looks pretty cool. And it's got all these like little different ways you can go everywhere, and there's different strategies with different rockets and solar powered rockets. So you can go slowly and go really far, or you can burn up and take a lot of fuel with you. And yeah, it's just there's just a lot there, and it feels like it's a puzzle that I need to solve, and I'm not going to stop thinking about it for a while, I think.
Well, let me pick up on your sci-fi, what you're putting down. Let me talk about The Player of Games by Ian Banks. Have you read any of the Culture series or Player of Games?
No, I saw you talking about it, but I have not.
Yeah. Took me a long time to get around this. I'd seen it recommended a few times, and then people on the Discord had recommended it, and it just gets a lot of high praise. It's especially being who we are and playing a shit ton of board games. It just like makes it that much better. It's a very interesting sci-fi book that's actually about like two polar opposite societies. I don't want to say cultures because one of them is called The Culture. Societies, and it all kind of comes to a head through gameplay in this kind of interesting world. It's very good. And so if that at all sounds interesting, a sci-fi book about playing games. It's The Player of Games by Ian Banks, and you can just start with Player of Games. You don't have to. You can read Consider Phlebas, of course, but you can just start with Player of Games, and that's what I did, and I really, really enjoyed it. Just wrap that up this month.
Cool. Like I said, I'm reading Dune right now, and my wife and I together are reading The Silmarillion, which I've read a couple, 3 times. She's never read it before, so she's really enjoying it.
Very good. Anything else, Rich, this month?
Like I said, I'm going to go play War of the Ring again with Mike. Miniature Market still hasn't announced their new location, so we don't have a space for our group to play right now. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, what else did we just played like Liar's Dice over the weekend. We played Successors, High Frontier, Republic of Rome, Titan the
Liar's
Arena.
Dice was fun. Yeah.
Liar's Dice was a blast.
That was a good late night game.
Absolutely. Oh, it's
Yeah, what else do we? Yeah, Titan the Arena, that was another surprisingly good one.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to give up complete hope on Quo Vadis, but it wasn't the game I wanted it to be, and that's just my expectations need to be adjusted. So I want to go back to it to see if do people need to be a little bit more cutthroat in it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But the surprise was definitely Titan the Arena, which is also called Colossal Arena, designed by Reiner Knizia, which is a little card wager game where you're playing cards to influence these creatures fighting in an arena, and whoever's the weakest dies each round, and you play 5 rounds, and whoever you bet on. And you can wheel and deal. We didn't do a lot of wheeling. We did no wheeling and dealing, but it was fun. There was nothing wrong with it at all. It was a good, solid game. Kind of like Successors.
Then we played a Bios game too.
Oh shit! Yeah, we played
Bios Mesofauna,
which is the creepy crawler.
Fun little game where you get to mutate your little guys and turn them into other things, and it was fun.
I actually really like
that with my family.
I like it a lot. I want to play. We played the intermediate rules, which are great, but I want to play the full advanced rules, which those contests we were doing where we were fighting out in a biome. It becomes less. I think it adds a little random element into it. I think you roll some dice, and like I told you, the victory conditions change. But yeah, Bios Mesofauna is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good. Thank you, Rex. Thank you, Doc, and thank you, Rich, of course, for joining us. It's a nice getaway each winter, and then just to focus on. Literally, all I'm going to do is just play games. I don't have to worry about a monster game. I get to play a lot of we played monster games, but I'm playing a lot of different games, a lot of variety. But I also don't have to worry about running a convention or anything like that. It's just cool. Go hang out. It's good stuff.
Speaking of convention, I don't think you talked about it today.
Hey, folks, registration is open for Historic Fest 2024. Did you know that we have a rooftop bar at our new venue? And did you know you can join designer Mitchell Land for a Drinks with Designer kind of Q&A session on the rooftop bar, I think on Friday night. Anyways, it's all on the schedule. I forgot my password for the website, and it logged me out. I was going to check it, but registration's open. You can go to historicfest.com. There's a link down in the show notes for the tabletop.events where you can go get tickets for all of those things. Got a great schedule. Things are already selling out. August 17th to the 20th. There's all kinds of games. Actually, Dune for Arrakis only has one spot in it, so lots of good stuff. Where's the Drinks with Designer will be Friday night at 5 p.m. up on the rooftop bar. Lots of good stuff on the calendar already. We got months to go, but do me a favor. If you're going to be there, sign up because it helps with planning and takes stress out of my life.
Don't stress Matt out. Come on.
Exactly.
What's wrong with you people?
Exactly. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it for us. As always, there's a link down to the show notes for our Discord server, which is the best place to go hang out. Kind of on socials. Blue Sky is probably the best spot, but not there all the time. Hey, if you like RPGs, go check out Black Lodge Trivia Night. Art does a ton of hard work, and I think we're really doing cool things. We just did a bunch of Dragon Bane content, which is a fantastic RPG. We've got Vaesen plays coming up. We did Cyberpunk Red. It's good stuff. Go check it out. There's a new RPG episode every week, which is kind of really impressive, with video. And then Art also plays a bunch of actual video games on there, if that's your cup of tea. Go check it out. Black Lodge Trivia Night. Am I forgetting anything, Rich?
Probably, but I don't remember either, so it's all right.
It's late. It's Sunday night. We got to work tomorrow. I'm a little under the weather. It's fine if we forgot something this time. It was a big episode. We gave them what they wanted. We gave them a new number one. The first time in...
I know. How
When did
about
we
that?
start?
54 episodes or something?
54 episodes. I started in January, but January of 18? Must have been 18. No, January of 19. Ah, shit. I can't even remember anymore. I'm scrolling.
I can hear you scrolling.
Sorry. It was 19 because episode 1 was 2018 review. So January 2019, but then, oh no. We ranked it in episode 4, which was March of 2019. So damn, should have delayed it a month so U.S. Civil War could have reigned supreme for 4 years. Just shy.
Wow.
Kind of sad. Got to pull one out. Like,
Well,
what are people going to give me a hard time about now?
Maybe they'll do a U.S. Civil War 2.
Maybe. Well, he kind of did.
With the naval stuff, yeah. I still haven't played with the new naval rules. I got to do that.
Yeah, though, you don't need them. End of an era, Rich.
Yeah.
End of an era. Like the jokes, like no one will have a joke anymore.
You got to close this with taps today.
You know what? I think we will. That's how we'll end.
I'm
Richard.
saluting. Everyone, I'm saluting as we close out.
Poured one out on the ground. Single tear down my cheek, and that's how we'll end. Good night, folks.
Farewell.